Hey y'all, I'm Chris Drosner, executive editor of Milwaukee Magazine and editor at large with the BBR crew. Welcome to the first edition, the very first edition of The Perspective. You can't tell the history of industrial brewing without talking about the giants that built Milwaukee. But history does not stop corporate streamlining. In this editorial, we're looking at the end of an era as Schlitz, the grand Milwaukee brand, is phased out, and why the death of one classic brand might actually change everything for how Pabst operates in the modern market. Here's my take on what this shakeup really means. And we're going to start at the beginning. Not 1849 when the brewery was founded or 1855 when the Schlitz brand actually began, but 1999 when Schlitz, its years of being the number one beer in the world, its years of being debased by its corporate ownership and becoming a laughingstock in the beer world, was bought by Pabst Brewing Company. These are two obviously titans of Milwaukee brewing back in the day, that by 1999 had pretty much been on the rocks. All the Milwaukee breweries had closed. The the beer world was changing, and it was not changing in the favor of these kind of very old school brands. These are the days of Miller Lite, Bud Light, before Coors Light even really eclipsed Miller Lite as a thing. But Pabst had an interesting idea, and that is acquiring all these kind of nostalgia laden brands, very much like Schlitz was, when it died. And what that looks like today is a Pabst Brewing Company that, of course, has PBR as its flagship, but also Old Milwaukee, Old Style, Olympia, Blatz, R.I.P. Blatz bottles, or yeah, National Bohemian, Stroh's, Lone Star, Schmitz, Stag Primo. These are brands that mean a lot in certain places and don't mean a whole lot, or might just carry curiosity in a lot of other places. These are not, with the exception of PBR today, national brands anymore. And Pabst really built its strategy on this. This is what Pabst is. I mean, certainly the Blue Ribbon is the flagship, but it's hard to say what percent that is in terms of the larger overall company, right? Without being inside it. And to be honest, we have not asked Pabst for any factual, confirmation of any of this stuff. But if you're in markets where these beers are popular, you know what space they occupy, and that's kind of like the $3-4 tall boy, they're kind of dive bar beers. And what this tells me is that meaning the Schlitz discontinuation tells me is that is not a going concern right now. Schlitz was the decision to kill Schlitz instead of like maybe bring its footprint back into the Midwest or shrink it somehow and let Milwaukee continue to have Schlitz while, Tucson doesn't need Schlitz and they have something else. That tells me that something major is happening in the beer world. And we've seen this, beer has been declining for several years, as overall, like the bigger trend is that alcohol consumption is down. Young people who I imagine are probably more into $3 tall boys than, maybe middle-aged folks or older folks. That's the younger people are not drinking beer as much. So when you've got, when you've got a portfolio of like 40 of these brands, that's trouble. And this is kind of what happens. We saw, the move that was reported first in this was that they were cutting back on packages, and a handful of like really weak brands like Old Milwaukee Light or Blatz Light, stuff like that has a really, really small market. But for a flagship like Schlitz to be culled at this point, tells me that this is that they need to consolidate, and they need to direct their marketing dollars around fewer brands. And um, I when I think about the marketplace of Schlitz tall boys or Schlitz generally in Milwaukee, I think about like Hams and High Life are probably two of the bigger competitors. PBR certainly, but like Hams and High Life are two brands that I see a lot more than I did in bars, either on draft or tall boys bottles, whatever, than I did even just 5 years ago. And these are occupying the exact same you know uh, market tier and niche as Schlitz. So putting aside the pain that this causes me as a Milwaukeean who's interested in the city's history and Wisconsin. I mean, this is Schlitz transcends Milwaukee certainly. Wisconsin takes pride in all its brands, and that's really evident in the reaction to this news, which is a lot of hand wringing and hair pulling, and but I also think that like, well, I'm gonna miss Schlitz, but when was the last time I had a Schlitz? And it has been a long time. When was the last time I had a High Life? Literally today. When was the last time I had a Hams? Recently, more recently than a Schlitz for sure. So, not to make this like too Chris's preferences centric, but there's a gap here in between what Pabst's strategy has been with all these really regionally very strong brands like National Bohemian, huge in Baltimore, Lone Star, big in Texas, Old Style, big in Chicago, Olympia, big in the Northwest, Rainier, all of these things have really regional cachets that I think Schlitz kind of lost in Milwaukee because we kind of perceived it as a national brand, even though there's the Schlitz Audubon Center here, and the Beer Baron names are pretty much everywhere in Milwaukee except for Blatz, I guess. This doesn't really roll off the tongue, but I guess the point being, the heritage of this brand, ultimately it's still just a brand to Pabst, and you can't really fault them for that. To their credit, they did not, they're saying that this is on hiatus and it's not gone. And I think that's evident in the situation that you see with Kirby, who you just heard from, and Wisconsin Brewing. That my guess is that I should. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. So yeah, Pabst acknowledges that. Tacitly acknowledges that Schlitz still has value, because this is not an announcement of a sale of the brand; it is an announcement of a hiatus of the Schlitz brand. So, and I haven't I haven't asked Kirby about this, but maybe Wisconsin Brewing asked to buy the brand and they said no, but we can brew a single batch of it. So where this leaves Pabst going forward, I don't know. It'll be interesting. I'm going to be watching their strategy going forward a little bit, and I think it'll be interesting to see. In the meantime, I'll be thinking about Schlitz. I was at Solomons today for a happy hour, and I noticed all the Schlitz memorabilia on the wall, and I took a picture of it, and I kind of got a little bit of the sad. So, it's losing things that we celebrate with is always a challenge. We see this when breweries close. When we spend times that people develop emotional connections to to beverages, to brands, to breweries, and that happens when a brewery is around for 2 years. But when it's around for 160, I don't have my notes, I didn't do the math, 160, it's a long time, more than 100, like generations. That's a different story, and it hits a little bit different, and that's what's happening right now. Yeah, I'm lighting a candle for all these other brands in the Pabst portfolio. It would be insane for them to shut them all down. But notice has been given for sure. All right, that's enough for me. This is Badger Beer Report. I'm Chris Drosner. This is The Perspective. Peace.